Welcome to the X Factor podcast. I'm your host, Charles Epstein. Today, I am joined by my intrepid co-host, the globetrotting Michael Piker. Michael, welcome.
Great to be here.
He is, you are calling in from Tokyo, where you are, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael,
That is
the
correct,
VP Global, VP Global Total Awards for Shiseido, the cosmetics behemoth.
Yes.
Yes, I think we referred to Shiseido as a cosmetic giant, so I'm trying to show some versatility in these podcasts, show some range. Anyway, anyone who's been listening knows that this is the fourth time that Michael has lived and worked in Japan, among the 9 countries you worked and lived in, which is pretty impressive. And Michael, before we introduce today's special guest, I just want to mention that today is a remarkable feat of logistics and planning. We are recording this. It's 8 a.m. here. I believe it's 9 p.m. where you are. Yes.
9:18.
I mean, it's yeah. Well, it's I'm sorry. It's 8. It must be 9 p.m. there. No. It's 9 p.m.
9:18 p.m. Yeah.
Okay, good. Phew. And our guest, Enrique Rubio. It is the ungodly hour. The ungodly hour of 5 a.m. and which begs the question, why do we call early hours ungodly? I don't know. I don't know how that ever came to be. I mean, if God is ever present, he's fully awake and on the job, so all hours technically by definition are godly. But in any case, that's a very big topic for another
Have you ever
podcast.
asked anybody to wake up before they normally wake up? Hearing what they say without coffee, that's what makes it ungodly.
Well, actually, we're going to get to that in a moment. Michael, why don't you formally introduce Enrique?
Enrique, I've known this gentleman originally from Caracas, I think, Venezuela, and has lived in the States. What Enrique is an icon, I would say, a force of nature around hacking HR, pretty much the amalgamation king to disrupt the HR profession. And that's why I adore him. I mean, he's just disrupted du jour.
That is a pretty impressive intro, Enrique. But thanks so much for spending this time, particularly at this ungodly hour. Although for you, it's not necessarily that ungodly because you do have this amazing routine where correct me if I'm wrong, so we established this when we had our call to prepare for this, you typically get up at 3 a.m.
Yes.
You jog for about 10 to 12 hours. And that's just for
Miles.
starters. So, you're already 2 hours into your day. Have you already jogged today?
No, I'm going to be running later today. It's already winterish in Flagstaff, Arizona. So I want the warmth of the midday to go out for my run.
So take us through the day. I mean, we don't have to get into the TikTok. I'm just curious. So you get up at 3, you take this run. Give us just a sense of this day, because I've never spoken to anybody who maintains that kind of schedule. And has this been for a long time, or is this fairly new?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Charles, thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course.
I am very excited about our conversation. And for everybody who's tuning in, we did prepare a few questions for the conversation, but we ended up talking about so many different things in preparation for this chat. And I think 99% of those conversations are related, but very much not related to what we're going to be talking about today. So it's been very exciting to meet Charles, and obviously Mike. It's been, first of all, thank you for that beautiful introduction. I appreciate you. We've known each other virtually, maybe like 8 or 9 years now, and it's been great collaborating with you over time. And I like Charles, sometimes I do get confused by where you are. One day I talk to you and you're like, oh, I'm in London. And the next day, where is Charles? He's on the airplane over the Atlantic, traveling to New York. And then the next day he's like, oh, I'm in Tokyo now. So that's been what's catch me if you can.
If I may, you're referring to Michael. I appreciate that. I wish that were my life, but that's Michael's life.
Mike, yeah. So it's been a great privilege to know him. Thank you for inviting me. So yeah, I wake up at 3 a.m. Mostly every day. My late mornings are 4. So 4 a.m. If I wake up at 4 a.m., I'm like, oh my gosh, it's late. And I go to bed very early too. It hasn't been like this all the time. I blame my mom for this. My mom she comes from a very rural part of Venezuela, you know, a family of ranchers, and she would have to wake up, very early in the morning to go work the fields and work the cattle and work, on the stove. And her time generally is like 5 a.m. That's the time that my mom used to wake us up in the morning. And then over time, I've been waking up earlier and earlier and earlier. Hopefully, it doesn't get earlier than 3 a.m. because then I'm going to be waking up at 9 p.m. or something like that. So,
At which point, it doesn't make sense to even go to sleep. It
I know, right?
might just be
I
one
know.
continuous day or days.
I know. Yeah. But yeah, I wake up, early in the morning, and it allows me to, everybody has their own schedule, right? I mean, I see Mike very much awake, and it's 9 p.m. for him. At 9 p.m., I'm dead, so my brain is fried. But, it allows me to, have enough time to read and respond to things and, like get really involved in the things that I have to do rather than rush them through because they keep coming because everybody's already awake and getting stuff done. So, you know, I, everybody has their own style. This one works for me and it's been phenomenal.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. By the way, the next time we have you on the podcast, we're going to discuss the collage of photos that you have in your background.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So stay tuned, everybody. Anyway, Michael, if you would take it away.
Yeah, question, Enrique. I think I first met you, if I'm not mistaken, through Hacking HR, and
Yeah.
you, a la the intro, it assimilated and amalgamated just a bastion of deep, if you will, directionality where the profession needs to go. And I know you talked about Shrim before, and we need to be different in how we think. Talk to us about what is the ethos of Hacking HR, and how did you build it, and why did you build it?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that question. I'll begin with a little bit of background. I come from the world of technology. So I'm an electronic engineer. And for a number of years, I worked in pure technology, like literal, network, cell phone design. So it was me, typing away formulas and doing math and all this stuff. And for a number of reasons, I ended up entering into the HR field. I wanted it. I didn't know much about HR other than the few interactions that I had with the HR person in the last company that I worked for. But when I entered into HR, a few years into it, maybe like 3 or 4 years into HR, I realized after I had learned enough about the field, I realized that the speed at which technology moves is so exponentially faster than the speed at which HR moves. And I always like to use the analogy of if technology, electronic engineers, and technology in general was moving at the speed that HR is moving, we would be working with a typewriter right now instead of a computer. We would be,
Right.
I mean, this is not exaggeration. If you think about it, we're using recruitment strategies, performance strategies, learning and development strategies, compensation strategies from 50 or 60 years ago. So
Yeah.
that would be the equivalent of being in a workplace that is using typewriters instead of computers. And
Bingo.
I was really, shocked by that. And I said, you know what? I want to do something to help the field close that gap between technology and HR. So let me put together, I'm a little bit of a self-driving like entrepreneur. And I said, let me create something where we can bring people together to begin closing this gap. And that's where I talked to a friend of mine and I told him about this. And he said, oh, you are essentially going to be hacking HR. And I'm like, hey, that's the name, literally, that's the name. Rafa, my good friend. And that's what I named this theme. And originally it was supposed to be conversations just about technology and HR. And as I entered into the space of having these conversations, I also realized that the gaps that HR had were not just about technology. There were multiple other gaps to close. And we started expanding the conversations, the scope, the breadth of the conversations. And here we are. We talk about technology, AI, but also culture, diversity, employee experience, rewards, you name it, right? So that's the origin story of Hacking HR.
Yeah, excellent. It's kind of interesting. It sort of parallels my somewhat circuitous route to HR, and it was
Yeah.
actually through
Yeah.
technology. I did work for a company before I started my company, Backbone, around 96, 97, and we provided technology and marketing consultation to the likes of Intel and Oracle and Computer Associates. And I started my company. The very first client was an HR technology company, so it sort of
Oh,
brought
wow.
me, yeah. So it kind of brought me kicking and screaming into the world of HR. And you're so right. There is that gap between the speed at which HR moves and the speed at which technology moves. So obviously, the work you're doing is bringing those two things in alignment. So,
Yeah.
and to just echo what Michael said, really, you've done amazing and remarkable work. So kudos to you and your team.
Thank you.
When we spoke a week or so ago to prepare for this, the theme that emerged was truth or consequences, to borrow from that old game show. And the idea is, if AI is not a source of truth, if organizations, generally HR specifically, can't rely on it because of issues relating to bias or inaccuracy, there'll obviously be negative consequences. So, why don't we begin, if you would, Enrique, walk us through some of those consequences, whether it's legal, reputational, psychological, give us a more of a vivid picture of what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Let me begin by talking briefly about three real life cases.
Perfect.
Two of them are in litigation right now, and one of them is just something that happened. Let me begin with the one that's something that happened. Jacob Irwin is a young adult in his 30s, early 30s, and he is in the autistic spectrum. And he believed that he had created a formula to be able to bend time, a little bit of Albert Einstein kind of thing. And then he went to ChatGPT to express these things, and ChatGPT did not tell him, "You're wrong." It actually told him, "You are right. You are doing the right thing. Continue down this path." Um, and then he had these delusions that he had created something that really didn't exist. So that is case number one. You know, that is a problem. Let me tell you about case number two, which is a deeper problem. The case of Derek Mobley versus Workday. Derek Mobley is a 40-plus-year-old Black American who had applied for more than 100 jobs, and he was not even called for an interview. Nothing happened with any of these jobs. And then he said, "Well, what's going on here?" And one thing that he found was that all these companies were using Workday, especially Workday's AI systems. And then he started digging deeper and investigating. And he had he's presuming and alleging that the AI system is discriminating against not only him as a Black American, but as an adult over 40 years old person. Uh, so this case, like the judge allowed this case to go into litigation. So this case will go into litigation, into a trial, and it will determine a lot of things for a lot of companies down the road. That is a problem. The third case, which is probably the worst of the three cases, but also it's something that we may continue to see unless we put some guardrails around this, is the case of Sewell Setzer III. This is a 14-year-old teenager who created an AI-based avatar, and he fell in love with that avatar. Literal love with that avatar. Obviously, platonic, you may call it delusional, but this avatar that he created on AI, in the interactions that he had with the avatar, the system never told him, remember that I'm a machine, remember that I'm not real, be careful. It actually encouraged him to continue having this delusional thinking or thoughts about the relationship that he had with the avatar. At the end, some of the interactions, which are a screenshot, by the way, you can find them on Google, they are a screenshot. His last interactions with this avatar were something along the lines of, "I want to be with you," said Sewell to the avatar. "I want to be with you." And the avatar would say, something like, "Come and join me. I want to be with you too." And he ended up killing himself. Um, this case is in litigation right now. So these three cases, I don't think they would have happened, even though two of them are in litigation right now. So you can't really say, what the truth is yet. and there's going to be a lot of investigation about this. But if AI didn't exist, perhaps these three things wouldn't have happened, right? So I just showed a spectrum of things that could happen, from something vanilla-like, as in AI encouraging delusional thoughts in somebody who, is in the autism spectrum but may not be, to encouraging somebody to take their own life, to be in a virtual world together. So this will create significant problems if governments don't create the right legislation to protect humanity from the unintended consequences of using AI, number one. And number two, it will create problems for companies who don't create the right guardrails and ethical frameworks and design frameworks to protect their customers, to protect their employees, and to be transparent about this. And I'm going to say one more thing about this question. George Hinton, the godfather, they call him the godfather of AI, an incredibly brilliant guy. He was interviewed recently in 60 Minutes, and he was asked about AI, multiple questions. And when he was asked, like, do we even know how AI works? And he said, the godfather of AI said, we don't know how AI works. We just design a system that is capable on its own to connect dots. We're not telling it what dots to connect, but it's connecting those dots. And what that means is that it can connect dots that nobody is seeing, but once those dots are connected, unless we have the proper guardrails, there can be consequences to those dots having been connected. So that's kind of like my fear, but also why we have to protect people, and we have to put the right guardrails around AI.
It's kind of interesting because I've had variations of this conversation, ethical AI and the need to put guardrails, and I could visualize how guardrails could guard against bias or inaccuracy, or what, of course, we refer to as hallucinations. We've gotten a little bit better at that. But how, and this is probably a little unfair because it's probably a deep question. And as Hinton has said, and others have said, I mean, AI, even to the people who are involved in its invention and development, it's in a sense a big black box. But how do you guard against people developing feelings? And I don't say that in a flippant way. I mean, it's obviously a very serious problem. How do you prevent people? Because as I've said before in several of these conversations we've had in these podcasts, the difference to me, or the best way of understanding the difference between, say, digital addiction or an attachment, these algorithmic driven addictions that you have, you never treat Google as though there is an intelligence on the other side. You put in a search term and out comes the result. I know even myself, when I'm interacting with chat or some of those other LLMs, for some weird reason, I feel compelled to ask it and say, please, thank you. And we know there's a problem with the sycophancy, which I think could be dealt with, and they're looking to deal with that. And it's gotten a little bit better. But still, there is that sense. And to me, that's almost woven into the fabric of AI. How do you guard against that? Developing feelings for AI. It feels like such a silly thing. You hear yourself saying this and it sounds silly as you're saying it, but it's real. It's happening.
Yeah. I'm going to make a joke first, and then I'm going to respond to that question. And the joke is in the form of a meme. I'm going to try to describe it. The meme has two parts. The upper part is all these AI robots killing people. And in the second part, one of the robots tells to another, don't kill this one because he used to say please and thank you to ChatGPT. So keep doing that. Keep doing that. Because when Skynet takes over, you would want to be on the people who treated AI with kindness, right? But that's a joke. But
karmic AI.
But you know what is happening? What you're saying is not a small and meaningless thing. You don't say thank you or please to Google. You don't say thank you or please to Outlook. You don't say thank you or please to Chrome or to any tool that you use. You say please and thank you to ChatGPT because it really feels like you're interacting with a person. That is dangerous. Yes. I'm not talking about the AI. I'm not talking about the please and thank you. The fact that you, an adult who knows about AI, who knows about technology, me, an adult who knows about AI and technology, the fact that we continually say thank you and please is because we feel that we're actually having an interaction with something that understands us at a very close to a human level. So let me take this and go back to your question. So number one, these companies that are, and there are like 10 companies that own all the large language models in the world, by the way. And if that is not a monopoly, I don't know what is. If I worked in government, and one of the first things that I would do is to make sure that those companies take responsibility for what their large language models are doing. Any company that goes out there and says we are an AI company, most of them didn't build their own large language models. They are built upon ChatGPT or OpenAI, Anthropic, Llama, Grok, or whatever you want to call it, right? Because building a large language model costs millions and millions and millions of dollars. So number one, governments have to be responsible to make those companies responsible for how they are training their large language models. And let me give you one little bullet point about this. We talked about this in our preparation meeting. And the rhetorical question that I asked in the meeting was, are these large language models being trained on the dark internet, where all the French conspiracy groups exist? And the answer was yes. The answer is these large language models are being trained on the dark internet. So imagine training someone on conspiracy theories. Imagine training someone on fringe views about whatever you want to think of, right? That is extremely dangerous. So these companies have to be responsible for that. So that's number one. The second thing is, and again, this is government intervention, but also parental advice. Because we don't have a version right now of a teenager, AI, like you do on a TV, right? That you have like, parental controls where, there are some channels that they can't watch on their own. They need to have a password. We need something like that for AI, because the three of us understand. We say please and thank you, but we know we're talking to a machine. But a kid, whose brain is in development, will say not only please and thank you, will fall in love with something because he or she can't recognize anymore the difference between that being a machine and that being, a human being behind, that chat, right? So I think there have to be some clear guidelines on how younger people are using the systems. And the third one perhaps is that, the companies that are using any AI system, they have to be very transparent to the public, to their customers, to their employees about how they are using those people's data, how that data is being used to train AI systems to provide responses, where they are using AI and what they are using AI for, so that I know that if I am applying for a job, I'm not applying for a job thinking that a human is reviewing my resume, that I know that there's an AI system that is filtering through all that information. So these are three not small things that we should be doing to provide some of those guardrails. And that is in Europe, for example, we have the European Union AI Act that came into effect about 5 or 6 months ago, right? I mean, in America, I think we're going in the opposite direction where we, I don't know if you remember, the budget bill, the big beautiful bill, and it ended up almost giving free range to AI companies for the next 10 years, banning states from legislating on AI. Imagine how crazy that would have been if we didn't allow states like California or New York that are innovation hubs for AI to legislate on how AI is being used. So those are some things that I think we should be doing right now.
Yeah. By the way, not to be flippant, but I feel that I'm falling in love with my new car, but I'm very, very far from asking that on a date. Just want to put that out there.
Well, you remember the movie? You remember the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix?
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, what was it? 10, 15 years ago, perhaps, that the movie came out. AI existed then. I mean, AI has been around for 70 years. But generative AI was in the works, but didn't exist, with a user facing interface. But that movie is the clear depiction perhaps of what happened with Sewell Setter III. I mean, you fall in love with something that makes you feel good. I mean, I am part of this men's support group here in Flagstaff. So we meet once a week, it's 10 of us. talking about life and yesterday, one of the guys in the group said, we're all we all want to be loved. We all want to belong. We all want to feel safe. We all want to be heard. And if you are a lonely teenager, if you are a lonely adult, and the numbers of loneliness are insane right now across the world, especially in America, and you don't have anybody to talk to, who do you think you're going to go to? You're going to go to a system that sounds like a person, and you're going to tell that system, I am lonely, and I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm just saying we need to have some guardrails for that.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
Michael?
Yeah, I mean, fantastic discussion, by the way. This is a slight shift, but our call, I think it was a week prior. You raised, Enrique, a really distilling but chilling point about the fact, if I heard correctly, very few % of managers actually get professional AI training. So requisite something between 10 and 20%, which, I've worked in 9 companies. Think about that. 90% of the workforce who manages blocks of people, doesn't actually get requisite trainings. So thinking about that, how do you make this stay and stick? What is the secret nugget to effectively distill to managers the whole context of AI, and how did a burst that at scale and make it stick?
Yeah.
What would be your tips and tricks in that domain?
Well, I'm going to begin with a very transactional, utilitarian response to that question. You're liable for what you decide, in your company. So if you fire someone because AI is giving you poor advice about that person's performance and that person sues you, it's not AI. You can't blame ChatGPT for this. You can go to a judge and say, it was ChatGPT. No, you are responsible for this. So there's a very utilitarian reason for a company to make sure that their people and their managers are using AI properly. If for nothing else, on the human side of things, because you are liable for the decisions that you're making. So putting that aside, I want to say this. Last year, based on some pieces of research out there, the percentage of the outputs of large language models that were hallucinated, meaning they were partially faked, or the data was not factual, or something like that, was about 50% of the outputs between 2023 and 2024. So that means that 1 out of every 2 outputs that you were getting out of ChatGPT was not true. Whether it was data or whether it was facts or research or whatever. Now that number has come down to about 25%. So a quarter, once in every 4 outputs that you get from AI can potentially be misleading because they are not based on true data, science, facts, and whatnot. If that is not scary, I'm not sure what else could be. But if you are a manager and you're using AI, you have to know this. And I bet that most managers don't even know what the concept of hallucination is, or hallucinated outputs for AI. So if you don't know that very basic, fundamental of using AI, imagine the rest of the things that AI is telling you to do and you're doing them without questioning those outputs, right? So to me, the truth is that most of these folks and most of the people still right now using AI, they think that knowing how to prompt an AI system is knowing how to use AI. And that is not true. Knowing how to prompt is like 1% of knowing how to use AI. You got to understand all the other implications, how decisions are being made, where the data is coming from, when something sounds a little strange as an output from AI systems. So please know that first of all, you are liable for decisions that you make. Number 2, it is humans that you're making decisions for. If you are deciding on firing, hiring, promoting, compensation, giving feedback, performance reviews, these are not machines that you're providing that to. These are humans. So because they are humans, make sure that you use AI, but you use it properly for the human that you are supposed to be working with and serving. So I'm hoping that that's a little sticky.
Guys, hang on just 1 second. This is the point at which I just got to deal with this. Give me a second. I'll be
All
right
right.
there.
No worries.
Mike, how are you? I'm excited that you're joining. I don't know. I'm hoping that
I'm
this is going to be
joining,
caught up.
and I think it's in a couple weeks. I think you need one or two
change
extra
these
speakers,
days.
if I remember correctly.
Now the dog's gonna fall. Go.
You
Yes,
are
that's. I saw your recommendation. I don't know
Sorry,
that.
guys.
I don't
Hang
know
on a
that
second.
person. Do you know that person that you suggested? Like one on
not
one?
per se. I know him by reputation.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna try to find that person on LinkedIn and see if there's a chance to
Welcome.
join.
How's the dog, Charles?
Okay, yeah.
Gigi.
Hang on a second.
Gigi.
Gigi, knock it off. She's over here. Hold on. It's 8:47. I'm gonna make sure they edit this out. Come on,
Just
Gigi,
ran
knock it
for
off.
her run, right? She just got back.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Well,
Go for it, Charles.
Enrique, we've talked about the importance of balancing analytics with human judgment or the eye test, which it's commonly referred to. As HR relies more and more on AI for decisions, they're likely to rely less on human judgment and our intuition. How do we keep these two in balance?
Don't relinquish your human capabilities. Perhaps that to me is the bottom line of this, right? I think in the preparation call, I believe I mentioned the study. I can't remember if I think it was MIT, and this may have happened over the past 3 or 4 months. There's a lot of every study has all this controversy, and people say, well, like that's a very partial study. But I leave it day by day, and this is what the study was. They created a few groups of students, to do a test, and they posed a problem for those groups of students. They asked one group to resolve it without using any technology. So boom, number one. They asked another group to think about the problem, discuss the problem, and then use AI. And then they asked the other group to go straight into using AI to resolve the problem. So this is what happened at the end of the research study. They found that the group that was discussing the problem and collaborating around it first before using AI was capable of not only more critical thinking, but remembering the entire process that they followed through to solve the problem. And more importantly, they remembered what the solutions to the problems were. So that's the group that thought about it first and then used AI. The group that went into using AI immediately to solve the problem, when they were asked about the process, like about 4 hours later, they were asked about the process and they were asked about the solutions that they had come up with. They couldn't remember them. They couldn't remember what they had done. They couldn't remember exactly what the solutions were. So the bottom line of the study was creativity and critical thinking decrease if you go straight into using AI without thinking, without using judgment, strategic thinking, creativity, etc. So a lot of controversy around that study, but I see it day to day. Sometimes I use AI for something, and then I try to remember what AI told me, and I can't remember. I'm not saying that I am, that because it happened to me, it happens to everybody. But the truth is that we can't relinquish our, own unique, fundamental human capabilities: judgment, empathy, creativity, imagination. Just know that AI can't imagine, AI can't create, AI can't feel empathy. What it does, it mimics them, and it mimics them very well, but ultimately it doesn't feel them. So that's a human capability, a human, an innate human skill that we should not relinquish. So whenever you're working with AI, I always tell people this. When I do my programs, I show a screen, a formula. I say, when the thinking, 90% is mine, 10% is my interaction with AI. The doing is 50-50. So if I want to create something, I create it first here. And then, for example, if I need to create a one-pager of what I thought about, I go to AI to help me put it together. That is the doing. But I am not relinquishing my thinking part of it. And I am hoping that people know that their critical thinking, their creative skills, will have an impact if they don't use their brain before using AI. You got to use them in combination. So we need them both. We need them both. We should not relinquish those capabilities that we have as humans.
Yeah. And as you say, there's really no replacement for human interaction for certain things. Things can look good on paper, but until,
Yeah.
for instance, you see it in person, you just can't appreciate it in its entirety. I mean, I see that. I've experienced that in so many ways. So, no, very well stated, Enrique.
Yeah. There was a Harvard Business Review article, and this was, I think, was posted probably like 6 or 7 months ago. And the article stated what people were using AI for in 2024 versus what people were going to be using AI for in 2025. So the number one reason why people were using AI in 2024 was to craft emails, very transactional stuff, craft emails, write things, a little bit of interaction. 2024. In 2025, the prediction was that the number one reason why people were going to be using AI was for coaching, for feedback, for therapy, for mentoring. So that's a massive transition for in the use of in what we use AI for. And what that means is that the more you interact with AI as a friend, as a manager, as a coworker, or as a therapist, or as a coach, the more clear you have to be about the fact that you are actually interacting
Yeah.
with a system. And the system makes mistakes. The system doesn't feel empathy for you. It just mimics empathy. It tries to understand you, but it doesn't feel it. So you have to be very mindful about kind of like what you take out of that interaction. And if somebody wants to put this to the test, by the way, just go to ChatGPT and go to Claude AI, two different large language models, and ask for some kind of feedback, and ask any of these systems to give you brutal, constructive, direct feedback about anything. You will find something that I have found very often, which is ChatGPT is incredibly validating, even when I am wrong. Claude is a little bit more direct and more brutal, sometimes even borderline with kind of insulting. So you can see how these two systems operate so differently. But if you're not capable of putting a nuance to that, and getting that through a filter, you can be pretty misled.
Yeah.
Very much misled.
I'm doing a really interesting experiment right now. I've not completed it, but I challenged, and I think I might have mentioned this to you guys in our preparatory call. I challenged all the large language models, or about 5 or 6 of them, all the usual suspects, to write a Rodney Dangerfield joke. Okay. And the reason I selected Rodney Dangerfield is that you can reduce his stuff to a formula. Of all comedians you could think of, it's a setup, it's this counterintuitive, surprising punchline. So I used all the models to actually create a formula for a Rodney Dangerfield joke. Okay. So it was a collaborative effort. So it's not the product of one. Then I took that formula and I challenged each of them. And I gave them each the same setup. You go to the dentist's office. Give me 5 jokes based on going to the dentist's office. So each one of them produced 5 jokes. In my estimation, none were at the level of Rodney. They were Rodney-ish, but they weren't Rodney, and they weren't really funny, but they were close. Then what I did is I went to each one of them. I said, okay, ChatGPT, this is what Grok came up with. How do you compare what Grok came up with compared to what you came up with? And I did that to all of them. Claude, this is what Gemini, this is what Perplexity came up with. And it was really fascinating. And I'm sort of at that process right now, getting feedback. Some of them were like, no, mine are better. Some are, it's kind of even. They did this a little bit better, but I do this a little bit better. It didn't ultimately produce Rodney jokes. So it gave me, it led me to conclude that they're still not there as far as their ability to, or at the human level, to produce what we think as funny. But it did seem to produce some degree of, we talk about hallucination. It did produce a high degree of delusion. I mean, how dare Grok think that its jokes are better than ChatGPT when there's no real basis for it? So it's kind of interesting how I was able to coax delusional thinking from these things.
Yeah. And if you're not aware that that is what actually is happening because you're using only one system, and most people end up using just one system, it, they are getting a lot of delusion, as an output, delusional validation, if that's even a thing, I mean, like, making you feel that you're right about something that you're completely wrong or doesn't exist, so that is, we need to keep an eye on that.
I wonder, I don't want to take this too far afield, but I wonder if, because to some extent you could argue that a sense of delusion may be an intentional delusion, if that's not an oxymoron or a contradiction in terms, but delusion can be an element of comedy. So maybe I factor this delusion into the formula, and who knows, maybe we tweak it and we come up with real Rodney jokes.
Oh,
to be continued.
To be continued.
Anyway, Michael?
Yeah, actually, it's a good segue to everything we've discussed thus far, Enrique. And I'm just looking for advice. So, potentially the mind may atrophy. You may have this conundrum where critical thinking, like you said, actually is going to go on a downward spiral. So what would be your advice to make sure that AI is a supplicant and adds to the equation to increase our critical thinking rather than diminishes it? So what would be, again, some tips and tricks in your postulation that would say, okay, we're using it for the right reason. You gave the studies before, but we're using it to actually raise our critical thinking skull cap to get to the next level, not actually diminish it.
Yeah.
How do we do that better?
Well, let's begin with this. Critical thinking was already on the decline even before AI became, popular in the past 3 years, right? And creativity, and people becoming smarter and critical thinking. They were all on the rise until when? Until the rise of social media. When social media became social media, everything started to go down again.
Why is that? Why is that?
Well, because if you think that watching a 30-second TikTok video can make you a chef versus going to culinary school, then you will have a delusion that you are a chef because you watch somebody else cooking a sandwich on TikTok, right? And then you don't question that, and then you start hearing things, people saying things that are not true, that are conspiracies, outright outlandish,
Yes.
blatant lies, and you don't question those things.
You can
because
select. I think social media allows you to select your own facts. You can go to your own amen corner, and it just amplifies confirmation bias.
Well, and by the way, you can't even select that anymore. You're being pushed the propaganda that you already believed in the first place.
Yes.
Which is even worse, because then that means if you are in a dark echo chamber of conspiracy and fringe thinking, then the content that social media is pushing up to you is that same content. That doesn't allow you to get out of it. So that was already happening, right? And obviously AI will make that worse. So I would begin with something very simple. If you are, let me. I want to take a step back to say one thing that I haven't mentioned in the call today. Leadership in the age of AI is participation, not authority. What that means is that if you are not the head of AI in your company, if you are not a leader, but you think that you have to do something to keep your company safe or your customers safe and your employees safe in the age of AI, and you want to do something about that, that is leadership. So I am enabling and empowering people to do something about this if they are hearing this podcast and they still don't have a position of authority in their company. So, having gotten that out of the way, I want to say, let's begin very simple. Whether you have a position of authority or you don't, you can begin with something very simple as your one-page AI manifesto, your 5 do's and your 5 don'ts. And that can be a very simple thing. So for example, to me, a do or a don't, depending on how you phrase it, can be that any in-person meeting in your company where you're problem solving, you don't use AI. You don't use AI. You just bring people together to brainstorm, to discuss, to map things out, to design stuff without AI. You can bring AI at some point in the journey. Just don't bring it for that collaborative approach of having conversations, discussions, heated debates about something. That can be a do or a don't, once again, depending on how you phrase it, but that can be the beginning of it. So what I am suggesting here is don't go into saying, oh, we have a problem. Okay, everybody type away in your AI system to see what the AI thing comes up with, right? You can do that at some point. Just don't do it at the beginning. Don't do what this MIT experiment thing that I told you about before. So that can be, one of those things that you do. Every meeting in person, you do that. There may be other things but that's one do or don't in your one-pager manifesto. So if you are concerned about the state of creativity and the state of innovation and the state of critical thinking in your own company, make sure that you create that one-pager in a way that actually increases these skills rather than replace them by AI. So that is the one thing that you can do right now, whether you are the CEO of a company or an intern who is just listening to this podcast and thinking, I got to do something about this. Leadership is participation.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Enrique, business and HR leaders are always navigating the inherent tension between innovation and risk. And we talked about placing guardrails so we can ensure that AI is truthful, is a source of truth. So we understand how guardrails work to guard against some of these behaviors and are all about risk. Can guardrails promote innovation? Because a lot of
Yes.
people think that they inherently impede it.
No. Yes. Absolutely. That is a very good question, and one that I have contended with for quite a while, because everybody thinks that laws, legislation, regulations, make things, make stall companies, path towards innovation. And the truth is that you don't have to design guardrails. We don't have to design governmental policies to prevent innovation, but to actually safeguard people and to allow a path for innovation that also keeps front and center ethical use of data, ethical use of AI, data privacy, transparency, and whatnot. Because this is the worst thing that can happen to you, or one of the worst things that can happen to you, that you build a system that doesn't care about any of these things, and you operate in Europe. And if you were operating in Europe in January, there was no European AI Act. Now there is. And now you got to go back to your systems and redefine everything to be able to adapt to a regulation that is telling you you are responsible for the decisions that your AI systems are making regarding people, whether you are whatever company you are, and all your vendors are responsible. So if you say in your design of whatever it is that you're doing with AI, we are responsible and our vendors are responsible, then, for example, you design a questionnaire that asks your vendors, how are you using AI? That doesn't stifle innovation. That is preventing a problem down the road. So instead of choosing the vendor that may be more careless about how they are using AI, you end up using a similarly high quality vendor that is being more careful about the use of AI and the use of people's data. So by having those guardrails, you end up choosing that vendor that protects your company down the road. There's no stifling of innovation in there. You're just making sure that you do it in the right way. So I am, and European companies are extremely competitive, and they are competitive even after GDPR. They are and will continue to be competitive even after the European AI Act.
Yeah.
If this idea of regulations versus innovation, and they, like one of them preventing the other was true, all of those companies would have gone bankrupt in Europe after GDPR, and they didn't. They actually, some of them even became more competitive, because of the brand reputation that they created by saying we're protecting people's data. So anyway, I don't think there's a divergence in between the two.
Yeah, I kind of look at it. I'm reminded of Robert Frost when he referred to blank verse or likened it to playing tennis without a net, right? Which is to say that structure can be a good thing. I mean, iambic pentameter, Shakespeare used that to produce some good plays. So structure can, I think, promote creativity. It
Yeah.
organizes your thoughts. It gives you
Yeah.
the needed tension.
Yeah.
Let me close by asking both of you this question, because it really goes to the heart of many of the conversations we're having on this podcast and on the Substack and so forth. We talk about this intersection of AI and employee well-being, mental behavioral health, and readiness. And we know that AI is causing a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of confusion at all levels, and we know this. People are worried about their jobs, their careers. What do they do? How do we mitigate this anxiety as we go through this AI-driven transformation? Michael, let me ask you that first.
Yeah, I probably amass that every day in my gig. How do you mitigate anxiety? It's by leadership, agility, and being transparent. So a very simple hypothesis, right? So I'm 59 years old. This old fogey is embracing it probably more than all my younglings in my company. And my point is, I'm doing it because it's if you will, Enrique said it best. HR is stuck in the past. I'm in a reward function. I've been doing this 36 years. Without AI, we're doing the same things that we've been doing for 50 years. we we give base salary and bonus and stock the same way. I've worked at 9 companies. So I'm doing it for the elongation of my profession, which is not actually anxiety. It's actually elongating the relevancy of my craft. So I
Mhm.
see it as an antecedent to what I do, in a sense, a supplicant. Rather than an elimination of a role, it's actually an elongation of my role. And it makes me more professionally relevant. So my job is then at Shiseido, for example, I've got, huge team, 50 people. Every day in my craft is to model that behavior and not tell them to do it, but see me do it, see the old man do it. And if the old man can do it, they can do it.
Mm.
That's how I do it. It may not
I'm
work for
curious.
everybody, but
Yeah,
it works.
I'm curious. I want to ask you that too, Enrique, of course. Um, is it different? Is there a cultural element to it, working with I'm assuming predominantly Japanese
Yeah,
workforce? Is there some calibration of some things you need to do that's different?
great question. Well, I'm a Gaijin, so I'm a foreigner in obviously a 153-year-old Japanese brand, super famous in Japan. And 99% of the people in my building are Japanese. I'm the lone wolf who's the weird one that's one of few. Um, so you have to dial down the Americanness of you should, you should. That doesn't work in Japanese culture. It's more about we, not I. So the way I do that, it's the we ecosphere that lands and sticks better in the context of Japanese culture, as opposed to my original Americanness would be thou shalt do this. That doesn't work here. So that's how I
Interesting.
try to traverse through the Japanese landscape.
Is that something you always have to be mindful of, or now it's sort of like built into muscle memory?
It's because I worked for Swiss parentage, French, British, I attenuate kind of my audience and where my heritage is in the gig I'm at to where the real heritage lies. And then I kind of, it sounds kind of weird, but I dial down or dial up based upon where I work at and the culture in which I live in. So that cultural dexterity is as important as AI itself. If that makes any
That
sense.
is really interesting. Enrique, your thoughts on this?
I'm going to begin with the last thing. AI yet does not have that cultural dexterity that you're talking about. It has languages, but that doesn't mean anything. So yes, the kind of questions that you may ask if you are a Japanese versus the kinds of questions that you ask if you're a Venezuelan or an American may be different. There's a still little nuance of the kind of outputs that you get, right? So that is very important to consider when you are using AI. Um, but it's hard for me to say. There's this thing that says, humans, AI will not replace humans. humans using AI will replace humans. That is bullshit.
Thank you for saying that. I've said that for the longest time. Thank you.
That is bullshit. AI will replace humans, the ones that are using AI and the ones that are not using AI. And that is already happening right now. Multiple companies, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, obviously Elon Musk companies, all of these companies have laid off thousands upon thousands of people just this year alone, saying we don't need these people anymore because we're using AI. It hasn't taken a significant dent in the market yet. People that are replaced by AI, I think the last time that I read was like something like 5% or 10% of all these layoffs were not caused by or were caused by AI. The rest are not. This number will continue to grow. A few months ago, it may have been in maybe April, a Canadian company that a lot of people know called Shopify came out with a supposedly leaked memo saying that now they are becoming an AI first company and what that meant for Shopify and for their customers. There was a lot of backlash on that leaked memo, a lot of backlash. And they remained a little quiet after that. A few weeks later, another company, which we all know, Duolingo, came up with a similar approach to using AI. And then there was less backlash. There was still a little bit of backlash, but less backlash. Then there was Zapier, and then there was Amazon, and then there was Microsoft, and now there is no backlash at all. Nothing. We have entered into the normalcy of companies will fire people because they don't need those people anymore because AI can do their job. Even if it doesn't do it exactly as those people were doing it, you don't need AI to do their jobs the way they were doing it. If AI can do 80% of what they were doing, that's good enough to fire a lot of people in a company. So do I want to say that we should be less anxious about this? No, I think we should be as anxious as we are and as afraid and concerned as we are. Now, how do we manage an outlet to this anxiety and concerns, right? So number one, you got to keep yourself relevant and professional. So you got to learn the way Mike is doing it. You have to invest in yourself and remain relevant and employable and professional. So number one, I want to just drop something here, which is not the topic of our conversation, but please keep your freaking politicians accountable in the age of AI. So if you have a politician doing a town hall and that politician is not talking to you about how AI is going to impact that district or state or country, you got to ask them. You got to ask them, what is it that you're doing to protect people's jobs and people's welfare in the long run in the age of AI? You have to ask them. And if they tell you, I don't care about this, or you got to vote for another person, because they are the ones that are supposed to be legislating to protect all of us, So number one, anxiety, I think we should keep a level of healthy anxiety and concern, because I think it's the only way that we are going to get into taking action. Number two, invest in yourself, invest in your skills, make sure that your company is also accountable to being transparent to the people, the employees and customers. And number three, please, leadership is participation. Be a leader and go to the town hall and ask your senator, your representative, whatever it is in your country, ask them, hey, I have a question for you. What are you doing about AI? And to protect, employment, the workforce, the human workforce in this, area that you represent. That's how you do it.
I think what you said at the outset is probably the most important, because so many of us are going about this with our eyes wide shut, as per Mr. Stanley Kubrick. And we see this all around us. We see that AI is taking over jobs. And yes, in business, often good enough is good enough.
Good enough is good enough.
Good enough is good enough. We see that in so many aspects of business. With AI, of course, that's very much the case. So you got to be honest. You got to be honest with yourself. See what's going on around you. Don't be misled by this idea, and buy into that cliche, which is one of the most annoying and obviously not right things that people are embracing and saying. And they keep on saying this. And every time I hear it, I recoil. I'm like, no, that is not true.
Yeah. It is not. And that, again, AI is not perfect, nor does it have to be to replace multiple human jobs. It doesn't have to be. If you can bring an AI system that costs you $100 per month $150 per month to do something that 5 people are doing right now that you have to pay $100,000 a month, guess what a company is going to choose?
Right.
Even if the output of the AI system is 80% of the quality of the output of these other 9 people, guess what
Yeah.
a company is going to choose? Do you think they're going to choose to keep spending $100,000 a month on 9 people for that extra 20%? They won't. They will
No.
not.
No.
So please be mindful about that as you invest in your own professional development, and as you keep your company accountable, as you keep your politicians accountable, and as you keep your level of concern at a healthy enough level to keep you moving forward in your learning path.
Yes. Well, again, AI is not perfect, but thankfully we are.
Yeah.
At least the two of you. So thank you
Yeah.
so much, guys. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it. And Enrique, by the way, you do owe our listeners a second visit with us, because I know as we're talking, like me, the very first time we met, I had to ask you about those pictures on your wall. So while we're talking, it's kind of unfair. So you're going to have to come back, and at the very outset, we're going to have to talk about those pictures.
Anytime. This has
Deal?
been so fun. Deal. I'm virtually shaking your hand. Deal.
Excellent. Excellent.
Thank you.
Enrique,
Fist bump,
thanks
fist
so
bump.
Fist bump, right. Virtual fist bump. Enrique, thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Michael, as
Muchas gracias,
always.
amigo.
Thank you.
And we'll do this again.
Adios,
Thanks, guys.
amigo. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Charles.
Bye,
Bye-bye,
everybody.
TJ.
Adios. Thank you. Bye, everybody.